And welcome back to 35,000 Watts, the podcast. This is season 3, and we are continuing our exploration of all things college radio. This episode's hosted by our good friend Lisa, and she's got a special guest with her this time.
Okay, today we have a special guest. His name is Jonathan Lee, and Jonathan comes to us from WKNS. So nice to have you today, Jonathan.
Nice to be on the show.
You and I met on Facebook a few years ago in one of our radio enthusiast Facebook groups.
Right.
I knew right away that you were a big fan of college radio, so I was glad that you reached out to be on our podcast today. What can you tell us? Tell us about the time you were at WKNS and how that impacted your life.
Well, as I probably know in our little pre-interview thing, like I took hearing an old interview, so we had a thing called Talkback before we were on the air, and I had a reel-to-reel tape digitized a few years ago, and it sounds really bad. You know, if you record over those multiple times, you can like hear the underside of the tape. It was a Radio Shack tape. It's real cheap. One of my classmates interviewed me, and I interviewed him, and I'd totally forgotten how I ended up there. I had been looking in or seeing ads in Rolling Stone and maybe some other music magazines for a place called Full Sail Recording Studio in Florida, and it was a school, and there's other ones too. And I thought, you know, I don't have any musical ability or anything, but I love music, so I was just thinking, well, maybe that could be a job for me. I don't know exactly in what capacity I would work in that studio, but maybe they could find a place for me somehow, and I could just learn about it. So I couldn't find anything like that really in my area of North Carolina. That would be like drivable. Somehow I stumbled upon the curriculum for Lenore Community College in Kinston, which is probably 40 minutes to an hour maybe from where I was living at the time. They had a radio and TV broadcasting program, and one of the classes was like commercial production and radio and technique or something like that. I actually still have a copy of that somewhere, and so it's like, well, mate, that's kind of close, and so maybe I could do that. And I am a radio enthusiast. I mean, I was the kid with the transmitter radio under the covers when I was a little kid, and I know all my friends would say they would listen to some station far off or whatever. I just listened to whatever it was, and it was probably just the local AM station or something. And that was the guy when I was listening to radio growing up as like a teenager and all that when the DJ would come on, I would turn it up. And people were like, why are you turning it up? Like, that's when I switched the station, or I don't want to hear what they have to say. Well, I do want to hear what they have to say, because maybe they're about to say Led Zeppelin's coming out with a new album, or whoever it is. And I want to hear what they have to say. So I was that guy. So, and I also did, my dad had a portable cassette deck, and when I was a little kid, I had heard about how you can crumble cellophane to make it sound like fire, or take wooden blocks and knock them together to make it sound like horses or something like that. So, clopping. So I did those little skits and stuff like that on my portable cassette deck. So all that kind of radio stuff, or theater of the mind thing, was already there before I ever got into it. So when I got to K91, the format, the class ahead of us, well, that's this WKNS, but they called it K91, which is an homage to K94 out of I want to say Norfolk, but that's not right. It was Tidewater, Virginia. I think it's kind of on the border of North Carolina and Virginia, and it was a rock station. So they did it as an homage, because that class was going to be top 40, or the station was going to be top 40, but in the 11th hour decided to make it a rock station. We were AOR format, and before you went on air, you did stuff in the production studio to kind of prepare you, like the talkback thing I was talking about, or how to do PSAs.
Okay, what years were you there at your college radio station?
1982 through 1984.
1982 to 1984. So what kind of music were you playing in college radio versus what kind of music was like non-college radio playing?
The format was AOR, but MTV launched in 1981. Our signals were not very strong, so I think our main demographic was, we're cutting out again. Our main demographic was, or who our listeners were mostly high school students. We played a lot of what's her name? Tony Basil, Mickey, I'm so fine. But I mean, that's not AOR, and it was not getting played on AOR stations. That's more top 40 pop, but that's where our listenership was. So it was very popular on MTV. So that informed our playlist, and I could show you some of those sometime if you ever want to see them. And then there was the Journey and the Zeppelin and whatever else, the kind of standard AOR stuff. But we also, but then the stuff that would be more associated with college radio would be more like U2 Ultravox, stuff like that. We were also playing the MTV kind of things, the Spandau Ballet, the Haircut 100, Thompson Twins, Wall of Voodoo. But we weren't playing Bauhaus, or we weren't playing Deep. Well, we were playing Devo, but we weren't a cutting edge college rock station like WXYC at UNC or WXDU in Durham, which I don't know if they've changed to XDU yet, or WKNC in Raleigh, which their whole thing was always chainsaw rock, is what they call it. But yeah, it was fun though. So it was a mixture of AOR and what was popular on MTV, kind of a top 40 thing. Lots of requests for Photograph by Def Leppard and Rock of Ages by Def Leppard. So, and again, that's that teenage crowd that's wanting to hear that.
So you were playing the rock hits of the day, as well as some of the new wave faves coming up on the scene at that time.
Correct. And we did play deep cuts like an AOR station did. So we had 45s, but we also played a lot of full length. We had albums. So we used the rotation clock as you did back then, or at least at our station. And so you had some freedom. It wasn't like a sheet of paper that said you have to play this. So it was college radio too. So, but we would have, the hit singles, and then the recurrents, and then the black dot meant like a deep album track. And we might play one or two of those an hour or something, if I remember right. And like, I have a picture of the clock somewhere too that told you what you could play. So it was a lot of variety. And then there was a commercial, so it was PSAs. And of course, most of us are all amateurs too. So some of them were more seasoned radio people that just wanted to gain more knowledge and be more professional, I guess, and maybe have that on their resume that they had a degree in broadcasting. The station was on the air from 6 a.m. until midnight, Monday through Saturday. They were off the air completely on Sundays. We had 3 hours of classical programming from 3 p.m. until 6 p.m., which was kind of a requirement. You and I talked about this a little bit, maybe a governmental requirement or FCC requirement that you had to offer some sort of something for the community or something like that. And that was one of the only paid positions there. I never did do that. There was other people that did, and they weren't really so into the rock and roll, some of them. But and they may not have been that much into classical either. And then the PD, which was also a student, that was a paid position. And we had a news team, and they taught us how to write news. They taught us, it was a creative writing class, so you learn how to write commercials, that sort of thing. And the classroom, the radio station was actually in the classroom. There was a box in the corner with chicken wire on it.
So you had a news team. You played different formats of music. Did you have specialty shows?
Right. So the main format was AOR. And at night, it continued to be AOR, but from 11 to midnight, there was a guy that had kind of an R&B soul dedication show. Magic Mike, I think is what he called himself, Mike Rouse. But then on Saturdays, it was all specialty programming. So one guy had a Christian rock show. I had a reggae show that was 2 hours called Roots Rock Reggae. And then there was our first instructor was Bob Snowden. Then he left. And then this other local radio guy, veteran of the area, Jim Kelso, came in. And I'd already finished my first year under Bob, but we still had some classes with Mr. Kelso or Jim Kelso. And he had a big band show, Make Believe Ballroom. So that was also known outside the station. I think it maybe had aired on an NPR station or something, or maybe an FM commercial station locally. But so he already kind of had a little following. But my reggae show followed his Make Believe Ballroom on Saturday afternoons. And I really honestly can't remember what all the other shows were, but there were shows on Saturdays from 6 a.m. until midnight, different formats, block format. And then during the week, they allowed you some freedom. Like at night, I had my own rock and roll show that I called Sounds of the South, and it was not just, it was bands from the South, but it wasn't necessarily just all Skinner, Allman Brothers, and things like that. I expanded out and I had like Mother's Finest from Atlanta. It's like they're still around. It's like a funk rock band, that sort of thing. And the slogan was, "We're not just whistling Dixies," just to kind of give you the impression that it's not just, Skinner and that sort of thing. Nothing against that, because I played plenty of that too. So that's what it was like. And other people had shows similar to that were at night, that were specialty, but they were rock and roll. One guy that was a classmate of his was the Rock and Roll Extravaganza, and others had other shows. But we stayed in format for those.
All right, so you were, coming of age in the southern United States, and there's one really big band that came out of college radio in your neck of the woods. What would you like to tell us about your experience with REM?
So I remember Radio Free Europe coming, I don't remember the hip tone version from 81, because they were not on my radar at that point. So we had a rock station out of Raleigh called WQDR, which was a Lee Abrams thing, and he was the one that came up with the Superstars format and all that. So that's the first place I heard REM. It was Murmur. It was 83. But the first song I remember is Laughing, and it stays with me to this day. I know they played Radio Free Europe. And so they were AOR too, obviously, so they were playing deep cut. But so at our station, RPD at that time, I remember seeing the chart, what we were playing, and it was like the chart that was geared towards what you sent to the trade magazines. and it had our ads and what had been dropped and that sort of thing. And as one of the ads, he had Radio Free Europe on it. So why do you have that on there? Because we're not even playing it. So I don't know what that was. I gather maybe he was just trying to keep up with the Joneses and make it appear that we were playing. But I gather he was reading the trades and saw that other college stations were playing it and that sort of thing. And maybe he was just trying to keep up with the Joneses by saying that we were playing, even though we weren't playing. And I don't know why we wouldn't have been playing it, because, I mean, they were servicing college radio stations with that single, I would think. At that stage of their career, that's where, because I'm surprised, like I've wondered. So QDR was where I guess you'd call Raleigh, not a major market, but what, a middle market, but not a small market either, not as big as Atlanta, but not, or New York or something like that, but a medium market, however you put that. But they were playing a band that Don Dixon, who was the co-producer of Murmur and Reckoning with Mitch Easter. Don's from out of state, but he had made his name here prior to the Murmur coming out with a band called Arrogance. And so QDR did play Arrogance. And Mitch Easter's from around Winston-Salem area. And I don't know if they ever played any less active. If they did, it was kind of one-off sort of thing. But they played a lot of Arrogance. They were very supportive of them. I don't know that Don Dixon had really made his name as a producer or session guy outside of Arrogance at that point. So I think that's kind of what gave REM an in at that station. And I think maybe one of the guys from that band might have been, from Arrogance, might have been a sales guy. Marty Stout, I think, may have worked at QDR. So that's what I've been told. Like, so in those days of REM, the whole thing is like it's college radio thing, and they're groundbreakers in college radio and topping the charts all over the place. So I don't know how many commercial AOR stations nationwide were playing REM at that point. The QDR did, and they changed formats in 84, ceased to exist. It split the country, but most of the people went to WRDU in 84, which was another AOR, and they continued also to play REM and very supportive of them and play the deep cuts and that sort of thing. So, and I think that's just kind of how that worked for us in this area, if you get what I'm saying. So it's like, but no, we weren't playing them, and I didn't have any access to any college radio to speak of back then. I knew of it. There was WZMB in Greenville, which we did trade when we were doing the reggae show. I had a co-host before I graduated, would come in and fill in for me sometimes, and he took over the show after I graduated. We traded places with a reggae show at WZMB in Greenville at East Carolina University. They were probably playing REM. When we were over there doing that, I saw a promo cart that had Michael Stipe and Mike Mills on it promoting the station. And I know they could have just called that in over the phone, but I think I found out later they did play Greenville, so it's entirely conceivable that when they were in town, they dropped by the station, which was not uncommon for those bands to do back then and record that. So, but I had no idea who they were in 81. I did not find out who REM was until 82 when I heard, or excuse me, 83 when I saw them on, I heard them on QDR. But they played all around here too.
Yeah. So being from that part of the country too, being close to Nashville and, REM in Athens and B-52s, college radio is known to be breaking like new wave bands and rock bands, but your station also broke some alternative country, right?
We played some of that, but I don't. So cowpunk. The only two that I can really think of in that time period of 82 to 84, and there's probably more that are escaping my memory, but Rank and File had Alejandro Escobedo in it, and I had no idea who that guy was at that time. I don't know who the band members were. I just remember that album or two, and Jason and the Scorchers. We definitely played Jason and the Scorchers. I know we played Rank and File too, because I had the album actually. Because when they split formats, I grabbed some of those and put them for sale in the library. And I'm sure there were probably some others I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head.
What about Steve Earle?
So that would have been a little early, I think. So when I got into country radio, like after I graduated, and I already had a job in commercial radio, like within my first quarter or so. So by 85, 86, I'm at a country AM station in Goldsboro, which is probably 30 minutes from Kinston. We were definitely playing Steve Earle, Guitar Town era, that album, and also Dwight Yoakam, the Wagoneers, Nancy Griffith, I love it. But Nancy Griffith, I was right on top of that, in a sense. So the album was Lone Star State of Mind, and I think she had 2 to 3 before that. But she ran into an issue too, where I didn't really get it at the time, but the labels were trying to make her sound more country to get on the country stations, and it was somewhat popular because she covered From a Distance, which I guess was her big song back then. But she was not happy with trying to curtail her sound for the commercial radio play on country radio. So she said, just kind of screw it and walked away from it. I'm just going to do my own thing. But she was there for a couple of years. I know we played that album and then the follow-up Little Love Affair. But Dwight Yoakam was the one that caught on. Like all the other folks I mentioned, they were kind of bubbling under, like Steve Earle. Southern Pacific was another one, which had some of at least one Doobie Brother guy in it, and I can't remember who else. But it was not unknown people. And there was one band called, I think it was the Normal Strangers or something like that. I'm probably not thinking of saying that correctly, but Randy Weeks was in that band who wrote a song that was later covered by Lucinda on Car Wheels on the Gravel Road. So all that stuff, and the Lone Justice too. I didn't mean to leave them out. But they were getting more warm reception at rock radio, I thought. So there was that whole 2 rock for country and 2 country for rock radio. And then Steve Earle, I think, got us in trouble down in Texas, a drug arrest or something. I don't know. And then I remember being told that he was being blacklisted by country radio, and like at a certain point they wouldn't play his music anymore. And I haven't really done the legwork on that to see how much truth there is to that. But he's a very outspoken guy and always has been, so I don't know that went over so well with some of the more conservative country listeners and people that were programming those stations. But when Guitar Town came out, it was popular. But then I remember like the new traditionalists, as they called them. I guess George Strait would be in there, Randy Travis, and then later Clint Black. I think he might have been an actor in my time, late 80s or early 90s. That kind of tended to be sort of thing that kind of won over, and also I call them arena country bands, so there was like Sawyer Brown, Restless Heart, Diamond Rio. Yeah, that also kind of became a thing. Then Garth Brooks, of course, but he was after my time too. And I remember my dad really liking like Garth Brooks, like that, the Friends of Low Places and all that, because it did have kind of a throwback country sound to it. But in concert, he was like suspending himself from a rope or something and swinging around on stage, because he grew up on Kiss and Billy Joel and Rush and stuff like that. So here's this country guy kind of playing these country type songs, but his stage presentations has fireworks and so arena country. And he's not the only one doing that, but he was one of the most high profile people. And that rubbed my dad one way. So I'm not into like all that, but I like his music. But that's a little after my time in country radio. I had a bad experience at that station and kind of got out of radio for a little while, and then came back in the radio in 92 through 94 at WSFL in New Bern.
How do you feel that your time in college radio contributed to your life?
Well, there's that thing people say about the music of your teens or young adulthood end up being the most important to you. So I think there's more than a little bit of a hint of truth to that. And I don't ever want to create the wrong impression that I'm one of those people that only likes or that music from that era or something. That's not what I mean. I just mean,
you and I have gone back and forth on Facebook, and I love that you're always putting out new music.
I've never lost my passion for it. I think and I don't know what, I've read a bunch about it, and there's that one thing I think and a lot of stuff this does not go over well in that group, but this guy posted a thing. It's about, so there's that book like so many 1,000 albums you should listen to before you die or something. So it's kind of based off of that concept, but it was all about new music. And so if you read that article, and I quote it often, this the neuroplasticity, where you're using your brain to learn new things, whatever it may be, but one of those can be new music. And it prevents dementia. It's been proven in scientific studies or whatever, or it could be a book or whatever, or just some sort of new activity. So, and I don't do it for any reason other than I just love music that much. I'm 62 and I just have not, and it doesn't mean I'm listening to whatever's the latest hit thing or whatever that is. And I'm somewhat out of touch with it, but, and I kind of always been for a little bit, like, top 40 is just not whatever I was ever really into it. I'm not trying to poop on it or anything, just, I'm aware of it and I could talk to you about it and stuff like that, but my stuff was always more off the beaten path a little. I'm still into it.
I've always appreciated your defense of Taylor Swift. There's always the anti and the pro, and I've just always appreciated your take on why Taylor Swift is important today.
Yeah, well, you're the one, and I guess it's still, I don't know if maybe she has to do album since then. I think she does. But her new album, Time, you asked me to listen to it. No, I didn't have to listen to it if I didn't want to, but it was kind of an assignment or something. And I did not make it through that album, but I tried. This is not that I don't hate it or anything. It's just doesn't appeal to me mostly. And I know she's trying to do some kind of indie rockish things, and maybe she did a song with somebody from the National or something like that. And I really love Boy Genius, and they're of that age, and they grew up with her, and they like her, and they performed with her. Phoebe Bridgers has done a duet with Taylor, I think. I know she has. And then last year when she toured, she kicked the tour off in Nashville. The first 3 dates were with Phoebe, but Phoebe brought out Boy Genius. They didn't end up doing all 3 of those. Well, actually, Phoebe had more shows than that with her. But those first 3 were in Nashville, and on the 3rd night it rained. So Boy Genius or Phoebe didn't get to perform, but she did come out and play with Taylor. But people just love to hate on her for some reason. I know what a lot of it is, and it's just she's a young, fiercely independent female that speaks up about how she feels about things, and they want to paint her as this horrible human being when she just donated all this money to hurricane victims in western North Carolina. There was a tornado last year or something. They're like, oh, she's such a horrible person. Well, she donated money to that. What did you do? Complain about Taylor Swift. I don't have to like her music, and I don't hate it. It's just not my thing. So, yeah, I have nothing against the woman. More power to her.
Okay, so what would you tell the students today? What would you tell today's college radio students and staff today about their experience in college radio?
The game, as you well know, has changed dramatically. So what role does college radio play anymore? Does it teach you how to run automation? I mean, so that's the fun thing about when I lived in the Triangle area where we had the 3 college stations at UNC, Raleigh, and Durham. I could call WXYC in Chapel Hill when I was leaving to come home from Raleigh, and I'd get a live DJ at 11 o'clock at night or later because they're up all night. They do it old school. So what's that preparing them for? It's not preparing them to go to work. the way radio is now, I got up with some old radio friends a few years ago. We went to a cluster, a station, a building full of stations in Goldsboro, not far from where I grew up. It's all a bunch of stations in one building. There's no live DJs, so there you walk into the control room, and there's a empty chair with some headphones where the guy recorded the weather off the air that plays later. So I don't know what to tell them. I mean, unless they're going to us, WFMU is live, KEXP is live, but they're not mainstream commercial radio stations. And then the program at LCC died out in the early 90s. And one of my classmates taught it for a little while. But I guess there's just no interest, the interest died in it or something. But so I don't know. I'm not trying to poo-poo on that either. And I just think commercial radio still holds a place for somebody because they say people like to say radio's dead or whatever. It's not the way we used to know it, but people are listening to it on their commutes, and it still garners ratings. Do they know the DJ's not live? Do they know like some computer software program's doing all the programming or most of it? The listener doesn't really know that, but we know it because we're radio people. But I don't know what those college kids, if they're just doing it for fun while they're in college, or they want to major in broadcasting or in some way, but they're not going to be able to get to do that thing, the live radio, when they get out of there. And some of them play College Radio Day has a vinyl-thon once a year and it may not just be college radio, but I think it mostly is, and it's not even in the U.S. anymore, I don't think. So for like an entire weekend, all these stations that are part of that network play nothing but vinyl for a couple of days. So, and you know how vinyls come back, and it's not back that big, but it's back way more than I ever thought it would be. So that's kind of cool. But again, you're not going to be doing that at some big station in Atlanta or something, or wherever it may be, Denver, or unless it's, so y'all got the Colorado Sound Station. Is that where you are, or is that somewhere else? You know the station I'm talking about? It's obviously in Colorado, but I don't know if it's in Denver, but they're like an indie kind of station. Maybe there's a little bit more of that kind of freedom there, but otherwise the only place you're going to find that kind of freedom is a low power FM or college radio, community radio.
Mm-hmm.
That's, if somebody asked me a couple of days ago, I met some guy that's really into turntables and stuff, and as a DJ, but not a radio DJ. If I would go back into radio, I would not commercial radio. If I would do it again, it would have to be a community type radio situation where I had the freedom to not play. Like there's music I enjoy that I love that's current, that's not reaching the commercial airwaves, that at another time I feel like it would and should. People complain about country, but are these country stations playing Sierra Farrell or Sturgill Simpson, Nikki Lane, and all these other people that play country music that actually sounds like country music? And again, I'm trying to be condescending to what's commercial country these.
I get it.
The bro country thing, I don't want to generalize too much either, because they're probably in all that. I think some Chris Stapleton, some people like that occasionally break through. But will we ever see these people that get labeled Americana that are playing what I would more closely relate to as country? Or will that ever have any kind of significant resurgence or breakthrough to a mainstream audience on that level? I just don't know. And even if it does, that's not going to change I'm not going to start listening to that all of a sudden. I mean,
what did you learn from college radio? What did college radio teach you?
I would have to go back to Bob Snowden and also my fellow students too. And I probably won't be able to cite any samples really off the top of my head like I would normally do, because I feel on the spot in some of these interviews sometimes. But just the advice he gave us, it was just day-to-day living kind of things that you applied to your work or your production work. And he used to say, keep it simple, stupid. That was one of his things. And I know there's many more, like, and how do you follow the clock and how you back time and stuff like that. And I just said indirectly answering your question, but just the things you could get away with on college radio. We were young and we said some, I did, and I know my folks did. We said some very immature things. There were people misbehaving on the air and stuff like that. College radio was good for getting that out of your system before you had to go work for the other station. The rudiments of how, running a tight board, that's not even a thing anymore. And I was talking to the turntable guy about segues, and I'm not sure that he even got what I was talking about. If you listen to a station now, there's no thought put into segueing two songs into each other. A computer does it, and they don't care. Like this has a cold stop or a cold start, or it doesn't know that.
Or it doesn't know that you need a break between The Cure and Metallica.
That's the other thing too. So one of our early homework assignments was to go home and listen to a station for 30 minutes and write down all the songs we heard. And I was telling this guy about that. And again, that's why I was like, I'm not sure if this guy's following what I'm saying. He's like 41 and I'm 62, so that's a generational gap there. But anyway, kind of the whole point of that assignment, I listened to WKDR because I was still listening to them. Some of my other fellow students might have been listening to a top 40 or R&B and soul station. But even then, and automation was around back then, obviously, but KDR was live, and they made a big thing about being live at one point when that kind of became a thing. In general, like one of their competitors was automated. There's a live human there picking the music and sequencing it in a way that makes sense to the listener, even though the listener doesn't know what's happening. So we wrote it down. This song has a fast tempo. This one has a slow tempo. There's a reason behind putting their songs into order that they did. They had the freedom. They weren't like totally playing, hey, I can play whatever I want. It wasn't that. They had to play certain songs, that sort of thing, but they could do it in a way to craft a listening experience for the listener. And the listener's not even knowing any of this is going on. This Pink Floyd song and then this Zeppelin song, because of the way they begin or end or whatever, the fade works really cool. They don't know that. There's no beat. The guy thought I was talking about beat matching. I'm not talking about that at all. That's a different kind of DJing. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the flow, the sequencing, the fast song and the slow song, and then the fast song, or two fast songs, then a slow song, and how you could craft that for the listener. And it's all part of the art of radio that's not there anymore because the computer does it all. That's sort of the basics of college radio. We didn't have to play commercials, but we played PSAs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had weather, and we had a newscast. I think we had one hourly that we did. Whatever DJ was on the air did hourly, like you just read 5 minutes of news and weather. But at noon at 6, there was a more extensive 15 to 20 minute newscast, which our Paul Ladd, who I recommended to be a guest on your show, do. But he was like, wore the trench coat and all that, was a hardcore, and still is, news guy. And he wrote all the news, and he got it off the wire and rewrote it, and we were taught how to do that. So those sorts of things, and I applied that to my experience in commercial radio when I worked at stations where you're required to do such things.
So, true story, I just recently connected with a college radio station in my area. They're in Boulder, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. They take community DJs, so you don't have to be a student. So I signed up to do that. But yeah, when I went in for my training, they were showing me, like, you pot down the automation, and then you pot up the CD you're playing. And I asked them about, segs, and are you doing any, sweepers or stingers between fast and slow songs? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, lost art form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that, you can't do it. If you want to.
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. He's like, go for it. If you want to produce your own, go for it. And I was like, I might just do that.
But with the reggae show, I always wanted to try to syndicate that, and I never really got anywhere with it. But in more recent years, there was a fellow student that we brought back K91 it went away, and it's part of an NPR network down here now called Public Radio East, but it's not a college station anymore. Like many college stations, it was acquired by NPR. But we did a K91 online, so we could do our own new shows, and I used GarageBand to bring back, I just did like a regular AR shift. Nothing newer than 1984, so it was all of the time. But as that went along, I was going to do newer music. And also my Sounds of the South and the reggae show. And I use GarageBand to do it, but it's not quite the same, but you can do more precise things with it, I guess. And it's obviously not live, but you can segue the songs and overlap them with each other and do the sequencing and stuff like that. And then you just kind of piece it all together. And I've never made them any longer than an hour, I don't think, for listenability, because everybody's got such a short attention span. But it's not the same as being, like, one of our fellow students would not do the K91 online because he wanted to be live. And maybe there's probably a way he could do that, but not the way we were doing it. So
right, yeah.
Most of us still had the bug, and then one of the guys had spent most of his life in radio and didn't want to be behind the microphone again for the rest of his life. He just burned on it.
Do you still have dead air dreams?
I hadn't had one in a while, but now that you said, I'll probably have one tonight. I have. And so when I was at WSFL, which we had started to get disconnected when I was talking about that a while ago, but my last stint in radio was at AOR station in New Bern. And I did overnight shifts most of the time there. And we'd go to a friend's house. I call it one of my classmates from K91, his friend's house. He also got me the job there. I go sleep at his house when I got off the air on Saturday mornings at 6 a.m. And I got up and sleepwalked to my car and brought in my Case Logic thing full of CDs, because in my dream, I dreamed I'd run out of music to play. But I don't sleepwalk anymore, but I used to. But yeah. So, and they're not dreams, they're nightmares. A lot of them seem to be at that last country station I worked at, which was my second to last job in radio, which it was always there for some reason. And I couldn't find a song or even a PSA to play, but as I was watching the song run out live on the air, I'm trying to find something to buffer the gap so I could find the next thing to play, and I could never do it in time or find it at all.
Or the CD player doesn't work, or the turntable won't turn on.
I have had those like long after I got out of radio, and I don't remember the last time I had that dream, but it probably hasn't been that long. But
well, this has been great. I've just really enjoyed getting to know you and your experience in that part of the world, and thank you for being such a fan of our project. And always supporting college radio. Even before we were doing this project, you were talking about college radio in our radio group.
Definitely a big thanks to all of our supporters and all the supporters of college radio out there. Thanks to Lisa and Jonathan for an excellent interview. We appreciate it. And don't forget, 35,000 Watts, The Story of College Radio, a documentary film about, of course, college radio, is available now on multiple platforms, Amazon Prime, Google Play, Tubi, and now available on YouTube as well. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, or maybe if you just want to watch it again, go check it out. It is available right now. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for another episode of 35,000 Watts, the podcast.